Hey y'all, how's it going? My name's Marker and welcome to my first video for Rainbow Six Siege. The topic for today's discussion is this season's mid-season reinforcements for Rainbow Six Siege, which are now live. As you may know, these reinforcements include bug fixes, changes to operators, and new content. And I'm happy to say that this mid-season reinforcement looks like it could be the biggest one yet. Now I'll list off some of the major patch notes for 5.2 and give my personal opinion on them as I go along. So let's jump right into it. For starters, probably the most exciting change to the game is the long-awaited buff for Tachanka. Previously the laughingstock of the game with a ridiculously low pick percentage, Tachanka has received a shield for his LMG turret. This shield covers his head from many angles and can take up to 500 damage. This change seems like it could shift things around a lot in the game. It makes Tachanka a more feasible option and challenges the enemy team to reconsider their attacking methods. With that being said, however, I do not think that it makes him a must-pick operator. Sure, the first few days after the patch, everyone is going to want to try him out, but I think this hype will die down after a while and he'll become a second-tier operator at best. I just think that there are still much more useful operators in the game, and although it is nice that Tachanka now has the shield, let us not forget that many operators already have their own shield anyways. Sure, it can be argued that none of them have his LMG turret, but let's be honest, the LMG is not really all that great to begin with. You could also say Tachanka is stronger because he has both a body shield and a head shield now. But when push comes to shove, I think most people would prefer some of the benefits that the other operators provide. Why pick Tachanka when you can have a Doc, Mute, Bandit, or even Caveira on your team? All of these operators and more are still, in my opinion, more versatile and convenient options. Still, it is nice that Tachanka is finally getting some of the much needed attention he deserves, and hopefully this will not be the last upgrade we see for him. Moving on to our next subject, we have two operators who are getting an additional special gadget for their arsenal. Bandit is getting one more battery, bringing his total up to 4, and Fuse is getting one more cluster charge, giving him a total of 3. For Bandit, I think this satisfies a much needed upgrade for his class, because oftentimes myself and others found that 3 batteries was simply not enough for properly defending an area, especially without a fellow mute on the team. Most times the supply of batteries was barely enough to cover one whole wall, and usually not enough to cover 2 whole walls. So I think giving him an extra battery makes him an almost, if not absolute, must pick. Think of some of the strategies that can now be used with Bandit. You can theoretically cover an entire room and then some with the help of Mute. You can counter Thatcher's 3 MP grenades in some situations. You can Bandit trick without leaving too much of a weak spot elsewhere. Ultimately, although I probably still would not prioritize him over some of the other defenders, I like Bandit's buff. Fuse, on the other hand, I feel is not going to benefit as much from his buff, at least not in the sense of his extra cluster charge, but more on that in a few seconds. An extra cluster charge is a fair upgrade, but is not really a big deal. Most people, when they hear his first charge go off, know to immediately evacuate the area, which is why the second is rarely as effective as the first. I think the same will be true of a third charge as well. The only way I see Fuse's 3 charges making a difference is if his user strategically places the charges in different areas so as to trap the enemy team, or fool them into another area Fuse plans to attack. However, even then, I think planning such a tactic takes too much time in a game where every second counts. Plus, I am almost certain people would still figure out patterns and other ways around avoiding Fuse's charges. Although this particular buff does not sway me towards Fuse, he is getting another buff which I think does make him a much more viable option for the attacking team, which I will discuss now. The range of Fuse's cluster charge range has been increased from 2 meters to a whopping 4.2 meters. This change is a huge buff for Fuse, one that I think will make him a much more respected operator. The range at which his cluster charge is effective has more than double, making it more difficult for the defenders to flee the blast, especially those directly near the window or door that Fuse is fusing. This change makes Fuse a monstrous headache for defenders that are stuck holding down a smaller room. Sure, there are still ways to counter Fuse, such as shooting out his charge before it detonates, but sometimes such a tactic is easier said than done. Therefore, while I believe his additional cluster charge was not at all that impressive, I am definitely in awe that his gadget's range has increased so much. I think this buff might even restore Fuse to his glory days during the early weeks after the game's initial release. Next up for our list we have Gloss, who is getting a couple of tweaks in this update. 2 important adjustments for Gloss have been made, both relating to his sniper. One is that it can now shoot faster, and the other is that it has less recoil. Although these may seem like minor changes, I think that both of them together make for a major buff for Gloss. If a sniper was not very deadly to begin with, it will definitely be lethal with these upgrades. Gloss's user can feel more comfortable being trigger happy because he can now shoot more bullets in less time and have more control over those bullets in the process. All these things considered, I believe Glass will see a small spike in his pick percentage, but he probably still will not be a must pick in a world where Ash, Thermite, Twitch, and other great attacking operators are available. The only map I see him becoming a must pick on at this point is Presidential Plane. seeing as he is already a popular choice on that map, and this upgrade will only make him stronger. Next up, we have Blackbeard. Yes, arguably the most controversial operator in the game, Blackbeard is getting yet another nerf in this 5.2 update. Each of his shields can now only take 60 damage, which is a significant drop from their previous 150 damage durability. This brings his total shield health down from 300 to only 120, which is a lot less than the amount of one of his shields before the update. Such a nerf obviously hurts Blackbeard a lot. His shield can only take about 1 to 2 shots now, so he is definitely going to be more hesitant about peeking and attacking certain windows and doorways. I think good players will still find him to be effective, but maybe now they will more deeply consider other operators before selecting him. I imagine this change has been made in response to ongoing complaints that Blackbeard is still overpowered in his 150 shield health state. While I think Blackbeard was very powerful, I think their nerf for him could have been a lot less traumatic. I have a fear that Ubisoft is running the risk of weakening Blackbeard to the point of him being completely useless, especially for more casual players. And if the reduction of shield health was not enough, they have also decided to decrease the speed at which Blackbeard aims down his sight with the MK17 CQB. Such a decision lessens Blackbeard's ability to peek windows and get good shots off in some firefights. This change makes it two significant nerfs that Blackbeard is getting, and I can already see the outcry from lots of Blackbeard players. While I think he was in need of a nerf, I think the outcries are somewhat justified and that Ubisoft might have gone a little too far. Maybe they could have lowered the shield health to about 100 or even 80, which would still make for a pretty good nerf. With that being said, I think Blackbeard will still be a good but not great option for the attacking team, and in time maybe his users will adjust to the changes in such a way that makes him balanced. The next operator we will be taking a look at is Smoke. So his buff is not a major one, but is definitely something worth noting. Smoke's beauties, as he likes to call them, are now being thrown a lot faster. Previously, the throw speed was a little bit slower than normal grenades in the game, but now you can throw his smoke grenades at the same speed as other grenades. I think this is a fair buff because honestly it was annoying at times when you would throw a beauty, but by the time it reached its destination, your desired target was no longer in the area. Also, the slower throwing speed made Smoke pretty vulnerable in situations where attackers would rush in to challenge him. It does not help that the audio cue is very generous for the attacking side, and at this point, most people are able to easily dodge the grenade's effects. Obviously, Smoke is still a lethal operator with or without the buff because he can still prevent enemies from entering certain areas, but this increase in throwing speed just makes him that much more good and definitely among the top tier operators. Now we will visit changes outside of individual operators. One of the biggest additions in the 5.2 update is the new PvP map Bartlett University. As I'm sure a lot of you know, this map has been playable but only for Terrorist Hunt and the Article 5 situation. You might recognize it as a map with the somewhat annoying yellow fog. Well, this map has finally become available for player versus player, and in case you're wondering, yes, they did clear the fog for this version of the map. Not only did they clear the fog, they made a bunch of changes to the map to make it better suited for the player versus player format. One thing I noticed is the map is a lot smaller. Personally, I'm just excited about the idea of getting any new map at all. I think Bartlett University looks very promising. Moving on to an issue that I know a lot of fans have discussed, honestly, since the game's release, and that is the lighting issue. More specifically, I'm talking about the lighting issue wherein defenders usually cannot see anything at all when looking outside a window when playing on a map that takes place during the day. This issue always gave an unfair advantage to the attacking team because they had clear vision of the inside of the building, whereas the defenders had to look very hard for even the faintest shape of an enemy. I cannot tell you how many times I was looking outside a window trying to wait for an enemy to peek, only to find out via kill cam that they were already peeking the whole time and they just got an easy kill off of me because I could not see them. I should specify that the lighting fix applies to many more areas of the game than just the windows, but I am sure the primary goal revolves around trying to fix this issue and helping defenders get a better chance of guarding these gaping holes. In case you're wondering, I have seen how the new lighting looks, but only for one game. Nonetheless, I can confirm that it looks amazing. I won't get too much into it and let you guys decide for yourself whether or not this is a good fix for this issue. It should be noted that Ubisoft has tried doing lighting fixes before, so I would not hold my breath thinking this update will be the final, definitive patch for this issue, but it's nice to know that they are still actively listening to the community and trying to balance out the game in other ways besides just buffing and nerfing operators. Speaking of buffing and nerfing operators, the shield operators are getting an indirect buff in this patch. From now on, shields can withstand the blast of nitro cells, meaning that if a nitro cell detonates in front of a shield operator, such as Blitz or Montaigne, he will survive the blast. I think this is a huge step in the right direction for Rainbow Six Siege, because it makes shield operators a more dependable option again. Before this update, a lot of people hesitated to choose Blitz or Montaigne because most of the best defending operators have a nitro cell that could easily counter any shield operator. Now, if the shield operator is careful enough, they can move around the map and attack without suddenly being blown to pieces from the front. What is important to remember is that nitro cells can still kill shield operators by detonating either above or behind them, so there's still this balance at play here. In fact, most of the time people do throw their nitro cell behind the shield, but now they just have to be more consistent and careful in doing so. I think this change will make Blitz and Montaigne much more worthy attackers, but not to the point where they are overpowered because a good defender can still kill them with a nitro cell, just not as easily. Last but definitely not least, a lot of SMGs are getting buffed in their own right. Most notably, because there are a whole lot of guns getting tweaked, the UMP-45, wielded by Castle and Pulse, Frost's 9mm Scene 1, Smoke's FMG-9, and Caviada's M12 are all getting reduced recoil. Personally, I think all of these weapons already had pretty fair recoil, so I'm not entirely sure why this change was necessary, but it's definitely going to make these already great weapons much greater. Reduced recoil is always a buff, and always makes a weapon more powerful. I just hope this tweak does not make these SMGs too overpowered to the point where they are must picks. I think it is important for the game to maintain its current balance between shotguns and automatic weapons, which I think will still be the case, but only time will tell for sure. There are still some things about this 5.2 update that I have not discussed, so if you would like to see for yourself what I missed, or what you think needs more clarification, click the link in the description below and read through the many patch notes on the official Rainbow Six webpage. That's all there is for this video, so I hope you guys enjoyed. Feel free to like and subscribe, and see you next time. Enjoy the rest of your day.